Welcome. My name is Heather, and I want to personally introduce you to the platform Learning Through Art. Who am I? Why did I create this platform? What is its purpose? I want to narrate this through my own calling, my own soul's purpose, as I imagine it, vocation meaning soul's calling. And I'm going to do so moving through my life. Don't worry, it will be a fast forward. And I've always identified as an artist. This doesn't have to be art in the traditional sense of a picture that's perfect behind glass. In fact, it's really the opposite of that. It's art as a healing and a teaching, art that's transformational, in which the art that we create is a reflection, an outward reflection of the transformation within. This is my interest, and this is what called me directly to this work. Having studied for 3 decades different ritual practices from indigenous traditions, Christian traditions around the globe, what I perceive as the archetypal or universal aspects of truth within these different art-based traditions that I imagine as the soul's iconography, the soul's way to commune and communicate with us through images. For 3 decades, I meandered on this path, partly from formal training. I have an art history degree, partly from my own practice. I've been a professional artist for those 3 decades, creating nature work in murals, but also creating transformational work, more inner work as well. And that's really where I come into this practice and a specific soul's calling. About 6 years ago, I had an oracular experience. We perceive things in different ways, inner imaginings, inner knowing. And this happened to be in words. And usually, honestly, my communications are more of a gestalt. They're multisensory, with the primary sense being vision. But this was words, and it was very simple. People have forgotten how to learn through art, I heard. And again, because of my ongoing preoccupation with how do we learn through art, and learn really here as a different kind of knowing, a gnosis based on an embodied practice, a direct knowing through the soul. How do we learn through art? How do we remember? Why have we forgotten? There are these different questions and nuances to this statement, and one of them was that I knew that I was called to remember for myself through my own study and application, my own practice and theory, and that I was to communicate this to others. And so I, through a number of different synchronicities, ended up going to get a doctoral degree. Pending publication, I'm in the final back and forth with the copyright editors on that. But that was where I went, studying Jung's Red Book, Carl Jung, the psychologist, psyche being soul, as a lens through which to remember how to learn through art. Again, these different synchronicities that constellated to lead me on this path. And so I'm emerging from my doctoral work, having created an illuminated manuscript as an outcome of how do I walk this path, this painted path where the images are the stepping stones you move upon, following your soul in dialogue, communing and communicating with your soul. How do I bring that out to the world? Carl Jung said he only wrote down in a fragmentary way and couldn't work up in a suitable form for publication his way of teaching his patients, his students, what he often referred to as his advanced patients, this art-based practice. And yet it's an archetypal practice. So I found these different correlates in all different ritual art from around the world throughout time. How do I bring this out into the world, not only as Jung called for, to bring it to a wider circle, he said, but because my soul called for it, more importantly. People have forgotten how to learn through art. This, learning through art, is my attempt to create a container to teach this practice, to fulfill my soul's calling. How do we remember how to learn through art? How can I help contain you in this sense of psychic or soul containment, moving through this practice. That is what I'm about in this offering of learning through art. Why a website? That might be a natural question that arises, especially for older people who might not be as agile or adaptive at this website learning. It is a more recent phenomenon, and it was actually very explicitly communicated by my soul in communication in my art-based practice. And at first it kind of took me back, or took me by surprise. The communication was, again, really simple. It was that a web-based learning platform would be the best, most suitable form of publication. And I am not a web-based learner, even though my doctoral degree was largely web-based. So in a way that taught me something about how do you go about teaching through remote or distance learning. And so I've come about this way of teaching to you. And I have it modeled most explicitly in the examples section. If you look at the different menu bar options towards the end, you'll see examples. And I have a week that you can look at of sample offerings with different content and different forms. And they help embody and animate, which is to ensoul or illustrate, why a website is actually this really dynamic, embodied, enlivened way to communicate. I can have video as I'm communicating with you. In an art-based practice, we can communicate how do you create art. I can communicate different things about even going into nature. I can give you content that is audio, textual, and video, and almost always I will have those three different forms. And in my own application, getting my doctoral degree, I would listen to my lectures walking through the park. This allows you a mobility on your phone. It also reaches out to younger generations, and that's really important. Part of this is about reaching out to the generations that are not as engaged, statistically at least, with this kind of work. And it's bridging, in the Jungian field, for example, an older generational group to a younger group. And that bridging is really important. That's going to be actually the primary movement of the soul, is bridging opposites. Again, the young and the old, in a sense. And I think that's really important. I taught a college course based on this process, and it was about the psychic containment or holding of the ecological disaster or crisis that we're in. How do youth hold that psychologically through art to foster resilience, psychological resilience? And part of my dedication to helping the youth hold this work and hold the crisis of our humanitarian and ecological issues that are emerging and have been at this time is in offering a 50% reduction to those under 30 for these programs. I think that that's really important. So not only is the web-based option important for reaching out to younger generations, I have that additional incentive to bridge. Again, a web-based platform allows this universal accessibility. It allows people to not cut down a tree in terms of paper use, to have a really light ecological footprint. And this is important not only because this approach, in my experience and archetypally, is a way to bridge nature within and without. It's best held in that metaphor of the dark night of the soul in return to the Garden of Eden. This garden of this Edenic earlier time in which we lived in homeostatic balance, a dynamic equilibrium with the earth itself as creation. This is very much about us becoming creators in the image of the divine creator, learning to be stewards of nature. And again, connecting nature within and without. How do we do that? It's through the mediation of the soul. And the soul, in communicating to me, a web-based platform, almost seemed to highlight. And if you have these kind of communications, sometimes it's almost like things are highlighted in neon marker. And the universal accessibility, the ecological low impact, and also the reaching out to youth were all highlighted for why this web-based platform. Also the embodied nature. And I want to get into here how this is offered. You can see a little bit in the examples, but it really is a learning platform. It's a subscription that I have made to a teaching platform that actually has room for a number of different teachers. So it'll be about 20 different teachers that are constellating with similarly aligned work with moving with soul in the world. How do we do that? How do we navigate this terrain, this inner and outer bridging process? I am one of these teachers, and I am using this platform to help to organize, if you will, and contain our interactions together. So they are private, they are anonymous. That is actually a sacred aspect of containment, creating a safe container for you and your work. This is actually based on an analytic model. That's how Carl Jung taught this. Often it would be a shaman or a religious leader, but it would be someone in a therapeutic role that would be helping to contain the work. I am not a shaman. I do not want to be a religious leader, actually far from it. But I want to help you contain in this way that in the past people could create a container, feel held so that they could go deep in their work, following their soul and their soul's images. I'm giving you a basic structure to do that. Again, through the video, audio, textual offering, through different examples, but also through this platform that has your week-by-week trajectory. You can submit art if you want an interaction back and forth. It organizes and archives it so that you have it as a living legacy you can go back to and return to. Carl Jung said that he created the Red Book. In that book, he said, was the soul, referring to it as a cathedral, a church, but also a place to return to again and again for renewal. It's important that you have this material archived so that you can return to it, so that you can see it and see it again afresh. Because as symbolic images, you'll see each time a little bit different. You'll have a different angle of reflection. Something different will come to the foreground and communicate to you when you look at the art. Again, it also allows me to interact with you. There are different levels of subscriptions, different offerings, so that you can really look at and form what you want. This can be individual, just you, and that is perfect. If you want a deep dive, perhaps you're an introvert, and this deep dive allows you to just get the course material. If you want a beginning and an ending, that is an option too. These different options are held in the learning platform. The one caveat that I'll communicate that's true of this Learning Through Art website, but the platform itself as well, is that I am really using a natural and emergent model, meaning these images, the way that I present the content, will adapt and evolve. I want it to learn itself. This offering is something that is going to unfold. It's emergent. So I have built-in ways that you can give feedback if you want, some little give back incentives. But the idea is so that it is unfolding to meet your needs, and that it's in dialogue and in communion and communication with you so that it can better reflect your needs for containment. So when you come back to it, parts of it will be the same and it will always be archived in that way. Parts of it will also be evolving, and I perceive that as a benefit. That is a natural model, and it also is a way for me to respond to you in turn. With that, beginning with the examples, I'm going to go back to the home page, helping you navigate. The homepage is really about orienting you to myself, and that's probably how you got to this video. It has my introductory bio. It has what I perceive to be the most important elements of why would you do this? Why is this important now? Why is it important to be in this form? It's a different way of working with art. It's archetypal, but as my soul said, people have forgotten how to learn through art. We've atrophied in this way of knowing through art, and sometimes what's called visual literacy. I'm going to steer clear from academic terms, trust that I'm fairly burnt out on them myself, but really what it comes down to is our way of entering into an image, what's often called active imagination. We enter into an image, but we also let the image work on us as it worked on the original artist, so that we are in dialogue with the image, not it separate from us, but it coming into us, us going into it. This is the major bridging move. And when you do this work for a while, you'll realize a couple of things. It recenters you to your soul. Your soul is, again, this mediating agent. When we're able to bridge, Jung called it the transcendent function, but it can also be seen in this aspect of the Holy Ghost or Holy Spirit, this ability to merge subject and object, self and other. When, for example, Christ or different figures ask us to treat others as we would ourselves, this golden rule is in every major religion in almost the same verbatim form. How do we do that? It's the mediation of the soul that allows us to connect with something else in ourselves. That's how we become one with it, atoned, if you will. And that is inherent in this older way of learning through art. Essentially, people entered into the art and the art entered into them. That may sound really foreign, so I'll give you a couple examples. One you can see in different models, indigenous models often, in which art was a part of the world. You can see it in totem iconography, so that the person's identity was depicted in art. And that was a reflection of who they were, almost like their soul name or their soul identity was held in art. That's a way of understanding the significance of this kind of art as separate from what we might in the Western world think of as art. In Aboriginal Australian art, every dot tells a story. Every dot is in a meaningful and significant place. It has a purpose. And I remember as a young college student when I read that, I was really astonished because the Western tradition feels so random. But what we're falling back on is this underlying order, this unconscious that is supra-intelligence. It's transcendently intelligent because it connects to the world. So we can see that in the randomness, for example, of Jackson Pollock, these spatter paintings that seem like the embodiment of randomness. And yet when they've studied them, they've found an underlying or implicit order. Van Gogh, with his different Starry Night images, has a very similar underlying order. So it's almost like in becoming unconscious, Jung said, if we create unconsciously with our hand, we will be given a vision of the soul of the unconscious. We can connect with something beyond ourselves. This is another way of holding this. And that all that has to do for you right now in terms of understanding it, understand to get to the root of it, is just feel into it. See if it makes sense to you. Part of this, like, does it make sense, is based on our senses. We're trying to feel into and know this in a different way. Not just cerebrally, which makes us disconnect from things, not thinking but feeling or viewing in this older way. So the last example I'll give you is Jung said at the end of the Red Book that the soul was not meant to be thought, she was to be viewed, she was a painting. This gets again at this sense of what is that? To view the soul as a painting. Well, a couple of things. Viewing the soul as a painting, you see it all at once. A painting has all the different layers of creation all at once. We, in a sense, have the different layers of creation within ourselves, genetically, physiologically. The world has these different layers of creation that are under the surface, if you will. So part of it is going from the surface to the depth, mediating these opposites of not only above and below, that great Hermetic saying, as above, so below, as within, so without, as the universe, so the soul. It's bridging these opposites. How do we get into a picture? How does a picture come out from us? These different ways of holding art. And again, just feel into, sit with these images and see if they stir your imagination. The part that I can give you as a spoiler alert that won't spoil anything is that it's actually profoundly transcendent. The wisdom that you get in touch with through art transcends our individual capacity to know. They've done studies where all of Einstein's formulations, for example, were anticipated in art. Art has this transcendent capacity. You can see it in people like Leonardo da Vinci, who often it took hundreds of years to work up in terms of the technology required for his visions and his art to be made. It's this way of knowing that is supra intelligence, and that's the wisdom, the knowing of the soul. And that you'll have to just work out and walk out on this painted path if you choose to really feel and move more deeply into what that means. That's what I'm touching on the homepage. And then we go into the deep dive. What is this about? It's this depth of the soul. The soul is in every tradition, and yet it's almost this mystery. I remember in college the first time 30 plus years ago, walking around really realizing the first time that the Trinity, and I didn't realize I was going to tear up there, but there's such deep mystery in this work, in the religious traditions, that I think we don't recognize anymore because we've seen it so much. So what is the Trinity? What is the soul? What are we doing when we're moving around in the world? It's as if often we've lost our center. So this deep dive returns us to the center. I see it as the well of the water of which we drink deep, to dive into this well. And the containment is the soul. And then we move to offerings. What is it that learning through art is offering? And this is the evolution of my soul's calling. How do I imagine, based on these 3 decades of my work pursuing this way of knowing, how do I imagine that that can be offered? Well, I've taught workshops, I've taught a college course, I've taught in these different ways with individuals, with groups, to try to get at what is the best formulation of this material. And again, what I arrived at were these different incremental offerings. 6 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2, 3, 4 as a sustainable practice, and certification options if you choose to teach this. This is really between you and your soul, and it's really about how you move with your soul. What is best for you? Each person is different, has a different orientation. Part of what the website allows me to do is to teach to the different intelligences. There are 8 intelligences, but really there are more. We all learn in these different ways. So I'm trying to hold that and also give you these almost nodal containers. To start, you can do a 6-week, and then you can build like building blocks. Do you want to do 3 months? When do you want to do 3 months? It could be in our busy lives that's 2 years later. Do you want to do it all at once and let it unfold over time? Again, all of this material is archived. There are different options if you want to bring a friend, if you want to bring a group. One of the greatest teachings for myself from the process of my own doctoral dissertation is you move in cohorts. So you're held within a container, a circle, in a sense, of your peers, of a group. That is profoundly powerful. So if you have a group of people, you can, in effect, have your own class. And that's how it's held in the learning platform, so that you are private, but you can communicate with each other. You can communicate with me. So you have these different aspects that you can build into. You can opt in or opt out. To include, do you want a supply box sent to you, and you can check what materials you might want. Some of you may be professional artists. Again, that is really absolutely immaterial in terms of anything to do with skill. This is not about skill. It's about the dedication to the image and the ethic of honoring your soul's image. It's not about skill, but it's about making the image sacred through sacrifice. That's the root, sacrare. So you want to give your time. You will very much get out of this what you put in. You have to dedicate yourself to the image. So it doesn't matter what the image looks like, but at the same time, it's important that you recreate it in the way that your soul shows or feels how you communicate and receive it. And you want to give the time that it takes to really embody the soul's image. And I suggest that you'll know. I had to return again and again to different images that for different reasons I had trouble with, I had resistant to creating. So that's between you and your soul, but it is a dedicated process. I want to make that clear. And that brings us to considerations and decisions. You have different considerations. Again, you want to dedicate yourself to this process and this practice. It is invaluable. It is transformational. It is the treasure trove of the depths, the soul, whose insight, I suggest, is invaluable. It is the treasure without price in myth and in metaphor. But of course, you can't get it without trying. So you have to really be at a place in which you can go deep, in which you can really dedicate yourself to this practice. That can unfold over a long period of time. So it doesn't mean you have to have your schedule cleared. It means that you really are committed. And you can return again and again. It's made in this almost circular or cyclical return. So just as in the calendar year, we return through the cycle of the months, and we return through the turning of the globe, the orbit around the sun. All of this has this circuitous, circular movement of return. So return again and again, and each cycle or each iteration you'll get more. But you want to be able to really begin when you begin. Other considerations are listed in terms of questions and answers. What are the most common questions? What are the most common and deep considerations for you as you begin this work, as you hold this question? And I would ask it of your soul and hold, see what the response is. Is this a meaningful work for you? Again, try that example that we began with. That's a week worth of content. Don't be overwhelmed. A week doesn't have to be your week. It's a week as I've created it to hold you as a container. But you can extend. A week could be a month. This is an ongoing work of art, a great work of art in which you're creating yourself. As Jung and others said, it's this archetypal work of creating the magnum opus, the great work of art in the world. And that brings me to the conclusion of where I want to end, which is that this work is fundamentally about you and your soul, but it's also fundamentally about something beyond you. You, in this sense, are yourself, and this is often indicated with a capital S. This self that can connect to the soul, and through connecting with the soul, you connect from the center of your being with all being. William Blake said the vegetative universe unfolds from the center. From the center we connect with all life. And the anima or soul, her translation in Latin is life or life breath. So you're animating, giving birth to these images, this renaissance or rebirth of the soul's images, and you are, in a way, being reborn yourself. In this rebirth, your new center is not yourself as your ego or what you might think of as your little self. This isn't about that you. It's about the you that identifies with your soul, that connects to something bigger. This is you as the creator, in the image of the creator, creating in this great work of art. It's about learning how to co-create or collaborate with the soul in the world. And as you might imagine, this is fundamentally necessary. This is the heart of this work. Jung Soul said it's not a work or a teaching that's in the mouth of any teacher. It's not from my mouth. I speak from the ages, really, and from all of these different voices and examples that I've listened to and embodied. It's not to be found in any book. It is a knowledge of the heart. And this is the center of our body. This is where I suggest we drop down into our soul. And that will be a rehabilitation. We are so used to orienting from our head and even outside of our body, dropping into the soul, dropping into the heart, from here, serving this great work of art, of the soul, of the body and a body of art. Carl Jung said it's not for no reason that it's called a great work of art. We're helping to collaborate, to paint the world beautiful, to restore this connection between nature within and without. How do we find, again, this homeostatic balance, this dynamic equilibrium in which we are a part of, not apart from the world? This is what this work is about. Bridging ourself and others, bridging through the soul who unites all things from this new center. This is how we remember how to learn through art. And this is what learning through art is about. Welcome.